Welcome everybody to episode 10 of Nuts and Bolts, a Game on Oz's World of Tanks ANZPL show. Very special edition this week. We had the first week of finals that happened last Friday night. We'd gone down, we had 8 teams, 4 teams enter the semi-finals. 2 winners progressed to the grand final at Fortress Melbourne on the 22nd of May. And the losers of those 2 matches play off this Friday night for the 3rd place match. But let's jump into it. First game, Matildas versus Bulldogs. So this is 1 versus 4. Oh, hang on. Change look. We're professional here. Just got to change look at the camera now. First game on Muravanka. Matildas on defence there. They took some fairly standard defensive positions for Muravanka. Geordie was hiding and doing a good job of spotting on 2 flag. And they forced back a couple of back chats that were coming in for the Bulldogs right there. Matildas were able to get some focus fire onto AVT, but they did lose 2+2. In the end, there was a fairly decent brawl that happened, and in the end of it, Matildas came out with a 3v2 tank advantage there, pushing on, and they take that first game, the first best in the best of 7 series, 1-0 there, win on defence. Moving on to Bulldogs on defence on Muravanka. So Matildas moved in fairly quickly for a 1 flag capture, but Geordie did bleed out a heap and did put them at a bit of a disadvantage there. Bulldogs managed to get some good resets, even if AVP did end up going down. But the Bulldogs did rotate onto the attack, and they had a huge HP advantage there and ended up taking the win on defence themselves, drawing level at 1 apiece. On Ghost Town, Bulldogs on defence. Dark was scouting along the 9-0 line pretty effectively there. And Bales did rotate around to try and get some info to see what was going on that other side. There was a fair bit of posturing that happened, but eventually Bales and Whippet, I think it was, decided to go for this push onto Madhouse, but it all went horribly wrong. Madhouse and Dark, who'd also rotated around, ended up getting rid of Whippet and Bales, which was the beginning of the end there. So Bulldogs ended up taking a defensive game there. Then with the Matildas on defence, it was a bit of a slow start. Eventually Ravi moved down to the bottom of the map for a bit of spotting out there. With an AVP moved onto the capture, and he was protected fairly well. Bulldogs had set up pretty well. They had good shots on the angles to try and get at the Matildas if they tried to peek their head out, but eventually they did find an angle and got a reset onto AVP, so Bulldogs had to move off and force a fight. So Matildas did have a very large HP advantage, though you can see at the moment it's about 2,000, but Bulldogs just weren't able to deal enough damage, and Matildas ended up taking the win on defence there. So game 5 on Cliff, Bulldogs on defence. Stark did try and push up the hill early, but got eliminated, like he got deleted really. Climbing on defence is very hard there, but you got to try it to get that vision sometimes. Eventually Geordie rotated around towards the 2 flag, and then 4 other Matildas came around as there, and they did try to push out, but they had to do something, but it didn't work for them, and eventually Bulldogs just started picking them apart, and it ended up with Bulldogs winning on defence there. So best of 7 series if you're counting. Matildas 2, Bulldogs 3, and then we went on to Matildas on defence of Cliff. Matildas did take control of the donut over to the left hand side of the map, but Madhouse got up on the hill. Eventually Dark got onto Whippet, and there was this big brawl in the centre that the Bulldogs came out on top with. Just managed to get a little bit more focus fire than what the Matildas could, and ended up taking a win on the attack there. So Bulldogs winning the best of 7 series of the 1v4 and heading through to the grand final at Fortress Melbourne, knocking off first place Matildas. A little bit of poetry for the Bulldogs. The Bulldogs finished first place last year and ended up losing in the semi-finals to Archers. So they go one better this year, get into that grand final, and to face off against, well, we'll find out who we're going to face off against in a second, but because they didn't need the tiebreaker round in round 7, so that was a dead rubber in the end, so it didn't get played. But then we have Game 2, Sydney Showdown, Scorpions versus Sentinels. So in the first game, you can see the Scorpions did move down the train tracks pretty early on, and it was a bit of a game of patience pretty early, so people were peeking over the edge trying to see what's going on. Eventually Scorpions put on some cap pressure. Russian did get reset though when he was doing that. They tried a couple of times, but after the last reset, Scorpions pushed out and through some marvellous focus fire ended up with a 5v2 advantage. They got a little bit lucky. A number of their tanks were down to a one shot, but by the time it came to matter, and they did, like you can see now, Cindy's the only one left for the Sentinels, and with versus 5 tanks, you're never going to come out of that, no matter how many one shots they are. Game 2, Russian got some pretty handy fire here. He managed to hide behind these bushes pretty well before he was spotted out. Eventually they knew where he was and did come for him, but he did very good there, and it provided Sentinels with a really great bleed early on onto Sentinels there. Eventually they take a 5-3 tank advantage through about mid-game, and the Scorpions just picked apart the Sentinels, eventually taking game 2 on defense there at Prokhorovka, going up 2-0 in the best of 7 series. Game 3, we move on to Himmelsdorf, which you can see right now. So Scorpions on defense. Sentinels did they tried to sort of do the classic thing of stacking a couple of tanks and hoping that Scorpions would go for one and not the other, but eventually, once again, the Scorpions just had the angles, were able to bleed out some of the 50Bs fairly early on, and then just they were able to rotate around onto this capture point here, and it was done. The minute those 5 tanks rolled around the corner, it was done. Game 4 with Sentinels on defense. They must have been watching the Matildas a couple of weeks ago, because they just flew in here with numbers. With only a few tanks on the capture point and some set up elsewhere to try and get the crossfire, when you roll in like that, it's just goodbye tanks. There's too many there. And eventually on game 4, Sentinels finally pick up their first win in the best of 7 series, which is good, because if Scorpions won this, they would have gone straight through to the grand final. So well done to Scorpions for picking that up. Game 5 moved on to Cliff with Scorpions on defense to start with. Scorpions did charge in for a 3v3 fight early on, and there was some trades with Rainbow taking out Russian pretty early on and coming in. You can see there that they just focus fired really well down there. Scorpions were hit hard and ended up getting down to a 2v4 tank disadvantage, which was hard to see, but Sentinels kept pushing, and eventually they also took game 5. So comeback of all comebacks seemed to be happening here. In game 6, what a freaking round. There was a brawl fairly early on. Cindy for some reason gets down to a one shot at 5 minutes 40. So the matches are 7 minutes long. A minute 20 seconds into it, all of a sudden he's down to a one shot. He wins this match. Like that is just incredible. After all the brawls have settled down, Cindy manages to get this marvelous little one-on-one with JT. There was a damn good little ring around the rosy, and it just felt so tense. And eventually Sentinels take game 6, forcing it 3-3. So there's a tiebreaker on Muravanka, which favoured the Sentinels, because Sentinels were going to be on defence, and Muravanka is very hard to win on attack. And you can see Scorpions pushed in hard onto the one flag for the capture. But unfortunately, like I said, it's really hard to win on defense on Muravanka. Sentinels were ready, and they just come in, get resets. Eventually Scorpions move off and try to just take an all-out assault, but by that time it was just a little bit too late. And after being 3 games zip up for Sentinels to come back, it was amazing to see them draw it back level with that 3-all and then take out the win there. Sentinels with a 4-3 win in game 2 of the semi-finals to face the Bulldogs in the grand final at Fortress Melbourne, and the Scorpions to meet the Matildas for the 3rd place playoff this Friday on twitch.tv/World of Tanks ANZ. So that's going to be some amazing games to play, but before we get on to having a look at those next week's games more in depth, we're going to go the play of the round. And of course, you may have picked it from the way I was talking about it, but just this exchange between JT and Cindy. It was so tight. Both tanks got down to a one. Like, Cindy actually got in a shot on JT to bring him down to a one shot, and then just the way they both played, going around, trying to find the angle, trying to sneak up on each other. It was just a tense bit of play, and I think it was like 3 minutes 40, Cindy ends up surviving on one shot in this game. It was a crazy way to level the series and send it into a tiebreaker, and it was just watching it last Friday live. It was just so tense, and I remember screaming at the screen because I couldn't see how long it had left, because this is what we could see. But eventually, Cindy manages to find the angle, gets the shot onto JT, and secures the win. So that gets my play of the week. This week, this Friday on 6 o'clock Eastern Standard Time at twitch.tv/World of Tanks ANZ, we do get a bit of a curtain raiser game. Ouija's versus CC. So the Wargaming, aka Ouija's, versus the community contributors, CC's. So they're going to have a bit of an exhibition match to start with. You get to see players like, the Wargaming stuff like Vondel and J-Rated go up against some of the community out there and see what happens. There might be a bit of a chance for revenge, might be a chance for some crisp high fives to be won at Fortress Melbourne the week after. Then after that the Ouija's versus CC's, we get the playoff for third place, Melbourne Matildas versus South Sydney Scorpions, to see to finish out those rankings and see who finishes in third place, because there's some prize money for third place. So you've got to make sure that we have a nice little we got to know who's third. We've got to know who's third. So then, next, we got to talk a bit about ANZPL though, because that's still going on. The ANZB League. So Monday nights on twitch.tv/World of Tanks ANZ, this is going on. And Monday night, we had games between the Canberra Centurions and the Cairns Comets, which finished in a 2-2 draw, and the Wellington Wolverines and Hawthorn Hellcats, which the Wolverines won 3-1 and managed to leapfrog the Hellcats into first spot. So that's Wolverines on 3 wins and 1 loss, and Hellcats 2 wins, 2 draws and a loss. Comets on a win, 3 draws and a loss, and the Centurions on no wins, 3 draws and 2 losses. So that's what we got in the ANZPL. I believe there's one more round of the ANZPL that you can tune into on Monday night. So please tune in for that and see. It's been really good to see the Comets, because Comets were playing in the ANZPL last year, but unfortunately they didn't make it into the Premier League this year. But now they get to play in the B League and just keep in touch and keep playing as a team. So that's really great to see. Now, last thing for tonight, we've got to do this. We've got to do our tank fact. So, did you know the longest sniper shot with a tank was done by a British challenger in 1991, and it covered 5.3 kilometers. That's over 5,000 meters, man. I can barely walk that far, and this guy shot a shell that far, which for our Imperial friends, that's about 3.3 miles. So it's an incredible distance, and I can't believe it. Like even sniper shots, like proper snipers, when they're sitting there and they do the breathe out thing and try and shoot stuff, man, that's an incredible distance. So that is our tank fact tonight on World of Tanks Nuts and Bolts show here. Thank you so much for watching. We will see you next week for our grand final preview for World of Tanks ANZPL. Please tune in then.